Two and a Half Admins, episode 184. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. We've got three different news stories, and they all kind of tie into each other under the privacy banner. Why is cameras leaking footage again for the second time in 5 months? Avast have been fined $16.5 million for selling users' data, and a vending machine in Canada that has been scanning people's faces without them knowing.
I thought it would be interesting to just have a block of privacy-focused stories, because I know a lot of our listeners are very privacy-focused, as you should be, with the events of the last decade. Not exactly beginning with Cambridge Analytica, but that's certainly a nice big pin to stick in the map, and things haven't gotten better from there. It looks like the lesson that companies have been learning is not people hate it when we sell their data. It's, oh, hey, people might not like it, but it's more money that we can make, and we're not getting enough pushback to make us care.
I do think that the Wise example is a little bit different from that, though, because I don't think that was them intentionally trying to leak footage to different customers. That was incompetence rather than malice.
Okay, sure, but you say incompetence. What if instead we say not caring enough to make sure the job gets done?
Yeah.
Because the pushback isn't going to be big enough to make you care enough to make sure that, you do the organizational effort and you spend the man hours and everything else to make certain that you're doing the job right. If instead you go, oh, well, people can see their stuff, and so mission accomplished, let's go home at the end of the day. Well, you get errors like this. But actually, I want to talk about the vending machines first, because I thought this was an interesting example of a company that either didn't realize or just didn't care what their customers would feel like with the use of facial recognition technology, combined with sensationalist reporting that maybe didn't do the best job of capturing what that company was actually doing, and people angry about this entire topic also maybe not being willing to ask all the questions or much care. The headline reads, vending machine error reveals secret face image database of college students. And that's not correct in a couple of ways. For one thing, the vending machine error didn't just show people a database. What it did is expose an error message that had facial recognition in the name of it. So it made it clear that, oh, hey, yeah, there's a camera and we're doing something along the lines of facial recognition. And when the company was reached out to, they said that they were not doing any kind of individual profiling or, uploading the images elsewhere. They just wanted to get I believe they said the ages. They wanted to guess at ages using, image recognition algorithms, which is very different from building a database of individual students.
Yeah, well, that's totally fine then if they're just scanning people's faces and guessing their ages. Nothing to worry about.
Well, no, see, that's the whole thing. I'm not saying it's totally fine, but I'm definitely saying we as a society, we can't actually run herd on this stuff if we're not willing to look at what's actually happening. Because what happens is when you've got a company that's doing something like just looking to see, I don't know, we'll take their claim at face value and say, well, if we investigate, sure, it turns out they are just running, an age guesser on these images, and they're not trying to build a database of people. Well, if we know those things, that's very different from saying, oh, look, they're trying to build a database of individual students and figure out what they all like and sell that off to a third party that's going to this and that and the other. In a world in which both those things happen, it is actually important to know the difference between the two and to speak about it accurately. Because you really want to be able to hold the Cambridge Analyticas of the world. You really want to be able to hold their feet to the fire hard. And the more you start trying to act like anybody doing anything with any kind of, machine learning algorithm is doing exactly the same thing, the more you hurt your own ability to regulate the stuff that matters.
Yeah, so you want to be sure about exactly what they're doing. And if you're saying that's not okay, that's fine. But it also means people doing much worse are even more not okay. And you don't want to accuse someone of doing something they're not, because it basically invalidates your claim and makes it much harder for someone else to actually stop the vending machine vendor from doing the thing that people don't agree with, even if it is a lot less than, when it gets sensationalized, it makes it easier to dismiss the criticism.
You don't want to be the boy that called facial recognition image database, essentially.
What about Avast then? That didn't really come as a surprise to me, because them gathering and selling users' data, that's just what antivirus is in my head. It's just spyware and malware, at least.
In this case, it's a bit more that they were selling something specifically marketed as privacy software and then turning around and selling that data. That's what makes it basically fraud rather than just skeevy.
Right.
Right? Because if your virus scanner is collecting some data, you assume that it's, for our heuristics, we're looking at the applications that we scan and using that to detect new threats. And so, yes, it's expected the virus scanner might be sending some data back to the central office to be able to detect new threats and make better detections in the future. But when it's specifically from my antivirus vendor, I bought this privacy software that claimed it was going to keep my data from getting sold, and then they literally used that data and sold it. That's when it becomes something worth a fine rather than just derision.
This would still completely suck, even if it was part of Avast antivirus and not part of Avast's privacy-specific package. That's basically just kind of rubbing salt into the wound. This is one of those things, like, I can't say it's a surprise because this is a well-known, very widely used, completely free as in beer, though not as in speech product. Like, seriously, what the hell do you expect? How did you think they were making their money? Did you think that everybody paid for Avast, the way they never paid for WinRAR? No, man. You install this free software application on your computer, not free and open, just free as in beer, and you let it have access to all of your data, and you know that millions of people everywhere are doing the same thing, and there's no visible business model that doesn't involve selling your data or dumping extra ads on you, something. If you're not the consumer, you're the product. And it was really, really clear that there just wasn't any way around it. Like, you were going to be the product here. I'm not trying to victim blame, don't get me wrong. Avast are the bad folks here, and I believe Joe's favorite phrase is shower of bastards. And if you want one from the American side of the pond, I would cheerfully slam their dick in the car door for this. But with that said, it's not exactly difficult to predict.
Just as a quick sidebar, what do you recommend for antivirus on Windows these days then?
Windows Defender, just the built-in.
Yeah.
No other antivirus platform for Windows that I've looked at can actually back up any claim to higher detection rates. My experience with every major antivirus product you've ever heard of, I've had clients using them all at one point or another. My experience has led me to believe none of them actually do boast any higher detection rates, and almost all of them slow your computer down significantly more than Defender does. So yeah, leave Defender on there. I already know how Microsoft's making their money, and if they want to hoover up my data, like, they already have the ability to. I'm not really giving them any more ability to do that by letting Defender be the AV product.
What about you, Alan? Are you using that on the computer you're using to record this podcast with us?
No, it is turned off because I can't stand it slowing down my file access by reading files it doesn't need to. On my parents' computer and so on, it's Windows Defender because I'm not doing house calls to unvirus my dad's computer. The other thing I found from this story that was slightly alarming to me is that one company called Gen Digital now owns almost every antivirus you've ever heard of, including Norton, Avast, LifeLock, Avira, AVG, CC Cleaner, and Reputation Defender, along with lots of other browser and security-related products.
But don't worry, if you want a different complete pile of crap, you can still install Trend Micro. It's different.
That kind of consolidation, I suppose it's not unexpected, but it's still not ideal.
To Jim's point, the fact that Windows comes with a free antivirus now means people aren't paying a subscription to get a not as good virus scanner anymore. And so the consolidation is probably inevitable.
Not in the residential space at any rate. I mean, once you move into mid-market and enterprise, it's kind of hard not to find. And one final note, don't be Alan. If you're running Windows, leave Defender turned on. It's fine. It's not going to slow your computer down enough to really matter. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now, without even asking Alan a single question, I'm going to tell you Alan's doing that because Alan, like myself, has been using computers for a long time, is pretty confident that his habits aren't going to get him in trouble anyway, and he has habits built up from when antivirus was a lot more painful and did introduce a lot more slowdown than modern Windows Defender does now. I do not think it is worthwhile turning off Defender for a speed up. For the vast majority of use cases, I leave Defender on all of my own Windows virtual machines, and I recommend that you do the same. Don't be an Alan.
Yes. If you really need to, you can create an exception for one directory or something if it is causing a problem with one application or something. It is much better to leave it on.
Or at the very least, if you're going to be an Alan and you have a boss, even if that boss is a spouse, be prepared to explain why you were an Allen when something does get infected and there's a problem. Because the unfortunate fact here is, now I'll play both sides of this. If something unfortunate does happen and you do have a malware issue, odds are real good antivirus wouldn't have saved you anyway. Antivirus is essentially like a bulletproof vest. And, the thing about a bulletproof vest is you still get shot in the head, the arm, either leg. The wrong caliber will go through the vest, you name it. The thing about a bulletproof vest is if you must go into a firefight, you absolutely want to have a vest. But having a vest doesn't mean, yay, let's go run into a firefight now. But even so, once the infection has happened, good luck trying to convince somebody that, oh no, antivirus wouldn't have saved me. The antivirus that I made sure to remove wouldn't have helped. That's a really hard argument to make.
So the last one, the Wise with their camera footage leakage, especially coming so soon after the previous one, or rather just long enough that they've had time to try to fix it. And, they said it was fixed, but as with all of these, generally, if there's something wrong, it's not the only place that thing is wrong, right? It's called a class break. It means this problem probably exists in a whole bunch of different places in our source code, and we need to fix all of them. And just in general, to Jim's point earlier, these companies really focus on, we'd rather some user not have a problem looking at their footage than that they have a problem and are able to see other people's footage. And they're more worried about the user experience they care about, which is I can watch my camera, than making sure that nobody else can watch my camera. And that's probably doesn't match what most consumers actually would want if given the choice.
I suspect most of our listeners, like the three of us, and I'm going to, again, just go out on a limb here. I'm not going to bother asking Joe or Alan. I'm just going to confidently state, we've written enough code. We're familiar with the mindset where, okay, it's working now after I did a whole bunch of really frustrated things trying to get it to work after a very visible bug, and now I'm just going to put up my hands and back away slowly after hitting file and save. And when you've got a team of developers who's working on a project, I'm really not trying to do the big FOSS nerd thing here and say everything has to be FOSS. But just the reality is when you're talking about commercial developers, they're working for a paycheck and they're being treated as interchangeable cubes that can be slotted into, interchangeable cube holes. And they're not being given a lot of reason to care. And the company doesn't much. I mean, you're not really going to get, this craftsman-like approach that tries to make sure everything is right. What you end up with is a whole bunch of overworked people that are just trying to make sure to hit all the right bullet points to not get yelled at or fired. And once those are hit, man, it's time to go home. Where I'm really trying to get here to again is if the company doesn't care, the developers are very unlikely to care much either. And when the company doesn't really care about something like privacy because there's not enough of a pushback to make them care, well, it's the first thing to throw on the cutting room floor when they only have so many developer hours available and they've got so many things they want to do.
In particular, with these type of things, it's often that the company's working on version 2 of their product right now, and they had to pause and divert a bunch of developers to go fix a problem with the old one. And they was like, fix it as quickly as you can, and don't worry about looking for more problems. Get back to work on the new product.
I do think that is one of the advantages of open source, though, is that although this will happen with code, it will often get spotted and the project or company will get shamed into fixing it. Whereas if it's proprietary, it's not as obvious straight away. And it takes something like this to happen for people to be aware of it. And we're still not fully aware of what this bug was that caused people to be able to view other people's thumbnails and footage and stuff.
Yeah. And I would say, in open source, it's just as likely for there to be that bug and it not to get found until the same time. It's just once there is attention on it, more than just the couple of people inside the company are going to look at the problem. And that's likely when they're going to find more of the problems.
I will also say, as somebody who's looked at an awful lot of both proprietary and open source code, there are far fewer people on the open source side of things that are willing to do the, if you hold your mouth just right at work now, file, save, and back away slowly because, you can't hide your sins.
Yeah, that is true.
There have been any number of things that I had working that I went back and tore down and did better because I knew people could see the code and I didn't want to have to wake up to, a bunch of sneering condescension because somebody had gotten interested in the project and looked at it and been like, oh, hell no, that sounded good, but I looked under the hood and screw that noise. Whereas, on the commercial proprietary side of things, you do not have to worry about that. And again, if you know many developers, it doesn't take long before, even if you're not a developer yourself, you hear a story about sometime they were working on some code and like the vendor came in to support them on the thing. And, they spent all this time trying to find out what was going on. And ultimately, somebody at the client in IT asks the vendor, hey, I'm a developer too. Can I look at it? And, either just gets completely shut down. Oh, hell no. Or in many cases, you'll hear a story about kind of under the table, dev to dev. Okay, so the dev from the vendor does let the dev from the customer look at the code and is just immediately like, I'm sorry, when they do, because they know, you're going to see all of these sins.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that in that I know a whole bunch of bits of open source software that never made it to being open source because the developer was, I want to spend more hours making this pretty before I let anybody see it. I gave a talk about this at the FreeBSD Vendor Summit back in November about if you're designing some software that you're going to use at your company, but you're also going to share with open source. If you design it with the mentality that we're going to upstream this first and then put it in our product, it makes sure you don't cut those corners, right? That you're going to design it to be both generic and to follow the upstream style guide and in a way that when code reviewers look at this, they're not going to side-eye at you. That it's usually a lot cheaper than we're going to build it and get it working and back away and then come back to it months later and be like, oh, now we want to try to upstream this. And you're going to get, oh, we have to fix this and that, and we have to rewrite this. And then the reviewers are like, no, you can't do that, and so on. And so there's a good forcing function that comes from knowing that other people are going to see this. So, actually do a decent job.
Yeah, I was thinking the whole time, and, even if you have absolutely no plans to upstream it ever, no matter what, even if you would not release that code, if somebody held a knife to your throat, still write it like it's going to be open source. Every time you look at your code base, just imagine 100 of the best developers looking over your shoulder, reading it with you. Because the thing is, if you do that, yes, it will take longer. There will be times that you will get something completely finished and working as far as you can tell, but realize like this is clunky and weird and dumb and either inefficient or overly complicated, and there may be an off by one I haven't found, and I can think of a better way to do this. And then you tear it down and redo it the better way. And yes, that took longer. But over the long run, if you're going to be using that software for years on end, you will spend a hell of a lot less if you actually just go ahead and do it right the first time. And doing it right means thinking whether it's true or not, I have to write this as though developers as good as and even better than myself will read this code.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Automox. Are you prepared for whatever shitstorm may hit your desk during the workday? Automox has your back. Check out the brand new Autonomous IT podcast. Listen in as various IT experts discuss the latest Patch Tuesday releases, mitigation tips, and custom automations to help with CVE remediations. Make new work friends. Listen now to the Autonomous IT podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you tune into your podcasts. Let's do some free consulting then, but first just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to 2.5admins.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to send any questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Another perk of being a patron is you get to skip the queue, which is what Barry has done. He writes, following your excellent advice, I've made a NAS running Sigma NAS on a Minis Forum mini PC. It has a single Z pool with a single VDEV, a mirror made of two 4TB SATA SSDs. The Z pool has 8 datasets with different read-write load characteristics. The Minis Forum also has a 512GB NVMe drive, which is currently empty. What might be the optimum way to use this NVMe drive?
So in general, you've got a few options. The obvious one is as some kind of accelerator VDEV for the rest of the pool, L2ARC or log VDEV. Another popular way to use a small NVMe drive is as a second pool entirely. There's not really a one-size-fits-all answer for everybody. Now, I will tell you, if you have a workload, you did mention you've got 8 data sets that have very different workloads on them. If one of those is extremely high IOPS and will fit on your NVMe drive, it can be a really nice boost to have the second drive as a second pool. Because yes, you can accelerate particularly a Rust pool with a fast solid-state VDEV, a log or L2 arc, but I find in my experience, it is basically never the kind of acceleration that home users think it's going to be. And either they think it's great because they haven't actually tested the before and after and don't realize how little it's doing for them, or they do test it and they're very upset because they thought they were going to get an almost as fast as a solid state drive pool out of a bunch of Rust disks with one NVMe, and that's just not how it works. Similarly, if you decide that the second pool is not for you, I can tell you the pros and cons of a log or a special or an L2 arc, but I can't just give you a blanket, this is what you do with it, because that's going to depend on your workload. If you've got a lot of sync writes, then a log VDEV is absolutely the right answer. The question is, do you have a lot of sync writes? If you're running a mail server, no, you don't. If you're running a web server, no, you don't. If you're running a database server, you almost certainly do. And if you're running NFS exports, you almost certainly do. And if you have lots of sync writes, a log VDEV is very definitely going to be the right answer.
But at the same time, the log VDEV is never going to need more than about 16 gigabytes of space. And so a 512 gig NVMe is kind of a waste there, although you often have to go to the larger size to get the higher write endurance.
There we go.
But don't fall in the trap of trying to partition it and only use so many gigabytes of it first log and use the rest for something else, because it'll defeat the entire point.
That was the very next thing I had on my agenda of running my mouth about was, do not partition it up and try to do a bunch of different things, the different partitions that will not work. All 3 of the types of accelerating VDEV for ZFS, whether you're talking about the log VDEV to accelerate sync writes or the L2 arc to accelerate un-RAM cached reads, or the special to accelerate handling of metadata in small block files, all 3 of them, the way they actually accelerate operations is by decreasing latency far more than by increasing throughput. And if you have the same SSD doing multiple jobs off of different partitions, what you get out of that is unpredictable latency, because you're never sure which workload is going to hit which partition when. And when you've got competing workloads hitting the same metal like that, it can't really do its job reliably, which is to fulfill these requests faster, not higher throughput, but in less time than your main pool does. So you just end up screwing yourself. The other thing, we had some discussion about the idea of, also a horrible idea, partitioning the drive and adding the 2 partitions as a mirror and calling it better than nothing. No, it's definitely not better than nothing. It's a terrible idea. You can set copies equal to, but that's usually not the big win that people are looking for either, because usually the thing people are really concerned about is going to be their metadata, because they've had a bad experience with a file system getting corrupted and being completely unmountable and losing everything all at once because metadata got corrupted. But guess what? ZFS already sets copies equal to on metadata. You setting copies equal to doesn't actually improve that any. What you're doing when you do that is saying, I want copies equal to for the data blocks in your files. And that is a significant performance decrease.
Because now it's going to write out the data to 2 different places on the drive, so it's actually going to make the latency worse. Turning copies up also increases the number of copies of metadata, so it will waste even more space. And so I really don't recommend using copies equals to for anything. In fact, depending on your workload, there's a setting in newer ZFS, like 2.0 and later, called redundant metadata, where you can change it from the default of all to most, where for the less important metadata, it will actually degrade to copies equals 1 instead. So it's like, if you're willing to lose, a couple of megabytes of a file instead of 1 sector or 1 record, then you can lower the metadata tax and then get even more, which can be a really big deal on databases where every time you update a block of the database, you have to update all the indirect blocks, and you were making multiple copies of that metadata. And that's where that feature came from.
The last thing to mention is I said you could use that NVMe for a special, and you can, but you really, really shouldn't, because you've only got 1, which means you can't make it redundant. And if you lose a special, you lose the pool. So you should never actually create a single disk special.
I'd even recommend that 2 isn't enough. Every installation I've ever designed or recommended to somebody has at least a 3-deep mirror for the metadata, because if you lose that VDEV, that's everything. The whole pool is not usable now. And so in the new 2 petabyte pool that I'm designing, it's 2 4-deep mirrors for the metadata, because it's really important that it survive.
So ultimately, if you want potentially a little bit of acceleration on all your workloads, understanding that it's probably not going to be night and day, then choose between a log and an L2 ARC VDEV for your NVMe. If, on the other hand, you'd like to get enough acceleration to definitely notice on a couple of really high IOPS workloads and they'll fit, maybe move those there. But keep in mind, again, even though it's not a special and now it's not losing you your entire other pool, that will still be a single drive pool, and therefore you need to be Johnny on the spot with your backups.
Right. And even your primary pool in this example is a single VDEV. Well, I guess it's mirrored, so it's not as bad. But one thing you can do with the NVMe is if you put, like Jim said, a database or something important on it, in addition to whatever backups you already have, you could replicate a copy of it to the hard drive-based pool every 30 minutes or something, so that when the NVMe does conk out, that you have a copy that's quite modern.
Particularly keeping in mind that in my experience, if you put a RUS drive, a SATA solid-state drive, and an NVMe drive in the same room, the NVMe drive is going to break first pretty much no matter what you do to it. Those things are kind of living on the ragged edge. That form factor is nowhere near as old as any of the traditional 2.5 or 3.5 form factors. It does not have as much mass to dissipate heat with. It generates a tremendous amount of heat, and it just hasn't had as many years, or should I say decades, of battle testing to, figure out how do we build these to be reliable. And certainly they are a lot more reliable than the first couple of years that they hit the market, but still, if you show me those 3 drives and you tell me to bet on which one is dead, I'm going to bet on the NVMe being dead every time.
Alex is also a patron and skipped the queue, saying, I have a QEMU KVM host machine on ZFS with a growing number of VMs for various services. The QCOW2 files go on their own ZFS dataset, snapshotted and replicated via zRepl. My question is, should I be doing any pre- and post-snapshot hooks, like suspending the VM, or is a running VM QCOW2 image snapshot generally okay? Some of these VMs include their own Postgres installs.
So generally, if you take a snapshot while it's running, when you restore to that snapshot, it'll be as if the machine just lost power at the moment of the snapshot. And so Postgres is going to be able to recover from a crash and it'll be okay, but there might be transactions that didn't finish and will get rolled back or whatever. So if you can do pre or post hooks to try to get the database to quiesce before you do the snapshot, that's great, but it's really only an added bonus and it might not be worth the complexity of trying to coordinate that.
So essentially the word that you're looking for here is crash safe. Modern file systems you're liable to be using in a guest, ext4, NTFS, UFS2, you name it, they're all journaling file systems. They're crash consistent. Crash consistent means that if you pull the plug and reboot the machine, due usually to the presence of a journal, it knows the difference between fully committed data and data that is only half committed. And essentially, it just kind of throws away anything it was only halfway done right into the drive. This avoids leaving file systems in an inconsistent state after an unexpected power outage or kernel crash. So that covers most of your modern file systems. Now the next question is, are your database engines, if you have any, also crash consistent? Again, modern database engines are pretty much all journaling, crash consistent. If you're using old school MySQL, MyISOM, that is not crash consistent and not journaling, and you definitely need to worry about quiescing your VM. But if you're using modern Postgres, or if you're using MySQL only with NODB tables, or if you're using Microsoft SQL Server, you name it, again, these are all crash-consistent engines. They're journaling. They can survive a crash just fine. Now, the final question is, if you're in a sufficiently advanced environment and you've got big database applications, were those applications designed crash consistent? Because while the file system and the database engine are journaling and crash consistent, if you write a database-backed application in such a way that it will rely on 2 or 3 queries in a row to all complete before the database is in a consistent state, and you interrupt the power in the middle of those 2 or 3 queries, well, then you can leave the database consistent from the engine's perspective, but completely broken from your application's perspective. So at that point, you need to make sure now the technical term you're looking for is ACID compliant. You want to make sure that your database backed application was designed ACID compliant, which means anytime that it needs all of the data operation that's happening right now to finish, even if it requires multiple queries, it wraps those up in a transaction, which tells the database engine, this is an atomic operation, and if this gets interrupted in the middle, once you come back online again, you got to rewind it back to the beginning if you didn't finish with it. Once you have all of those things, now you know that everything is crash consistent and it's completely fine. You don't have to worry about keying anything because replicating a snapshot of a running VM is just the same as just reaching over and turning off the power button on a bare metal machine. Now, again, if you're a relatively casual user, home, small business, whatever, you usually, you don't really have to do all the research because thankfully we've gotten to a point where almost everything is fully crash consistent. If you're doing this professionally and you're working with larger applications, more of a budget behind you, all this kind of thing, then you'll want to actually dot your I's and cross your T's and do the research on all these things. Say, what is my file system? I can verify if anybody asks me why I'm doing things this way. Yes, look, it's a journaling file system. It's crash consistent. All my database engines, crash consistent. Our major mission critical application, ACID compliant. And at that point, you know you don't need to key the VMs. Now, with all that said, if you can easily and reliably key your VMs when you need to, that still might be worth doing. I wouldn't bother doing it for automated snapshots because there are also performance issues involved with keying VMs that can be kind of thorny to deal with. But when it's a situation of you're manually doing something and you're worried about it and you want to take a snapshot and make sure whatever, yeah, a lot of the time then I'll just go ahead and I'll just shut the VM down real quick, take a snapshot and fire it right back up again when I have that kind of a window to say, look, I just know I want a completely bulletproof, there's absolutely no questions, whatever. But again, with that said, I'll do that every now and then. I am literally never worried about a snapshot taken of a running VM on any of my stuff because again, I know I'm not running anything that's crash unsafe.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send any questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at jrs-s.net/social.
And I'm at Alan Jude on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Mastodon.social.
We'll see you next week.